Father's Day. As if you didn't know. I'm sure you did. Let me ask you fathers, or those who are thinking about what to do for Father's Day, what do you want for Father's Day? That's a question I've been asked several times this week. What do you want for Father's Day? And working in retail, it's a question I've seen on people's minds a lot as they've come into the academy, shopping for that special gift for the dad. I even had one lady come up to me and says, "What do I get for my dad for Father's Day?" And I'm thinking, I don't know your dad. How do I know what to get him for Father's Day? But I suggested a few things that she might consider. Maybe some fishing equipment, or a new pair of shorts and a leisure shirt, or Vicki got me one of those outdoor folding chairs that you can take to the beach or whatever. I think that's what the plan is anyway. And she even got one that rocks. And it's very, very comfortable, and I appreciate that. Maybe a new barbecue grill or something like that. I don't know what your dads want, but I'm guessing that for most people, they don't know what to get their dads because, like me, most fathers are going to answer, "I don't need anything. Don't spend your money on anything. I've got everything I need. You don't need to buy me anything. Save your money." Or sometimes I'll tell my kids something practical that I actually do need, and they don't like it because I say, "I need some socks." And we don't want to get you socks for Father's Day or for Christmas or whatever, but that's what I need, So it's always a question that befuddles me a little bit when I'm asked, "What do you want for Father's Day?" Well, I want you to hang on to that thought for a few minutes. I'm going to get back to it. But I got another question for you in the meantime. Have you ever considered shooting your kids? Now, let me rephrase that a little bit. Have you ever considered that as a father, you have the responsibility to shoot your kids in the direction that they need to go? It's very similar to what a hunter does when he draws back a bow with an arrow and releases it towards its target that he wants to hit. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6 says, "Train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it." And that sentiment that Solomon expresses there is very similar to what David said in the passage that we're going to be studying this morning. And as we study it, I want you to remember three words, just three words, because that's the whole sermon in a nutshell. But before you get up and say, "All right, we've heard it, let's go," those three words are gifts, go, and God. Gifts, go, and God. Turn over to Psalm chapter 127 and look at verses 1 through 5 there. David said, "Unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. Sons are a heritage from the Lord, children a reward from him." I would say sons and daughters are a heritage from the Lord, children are a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are sons born in one's youth. Blessed is the man who has a quiver full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their enemies in the gate. How many of you ever shot a bow and arrow before? Okay. It may be a very simple one that you made in your backyard out of a stick and a piece of string and another stick to shoot out. Or maybe you got a little simple archery kit with rubber cups on the end of it when you were a kid. I started with a recurve bow. Recurve is similar to a longbow, but the end of it has a little recurve on the end of it. It gives it a little bit more power. And I learned to shoot it pretty well. I learned to shoot it without sights, and they call it shooting instinctively. And I got where I could hit my target pretty well. And then they upgraded to a compound bow. A compound one that has the pulleys and the cams and stuff on it and multiple strings on it. That it's a little bit easier to hold back because it breaks over and it has a kind of a release on it. But it's also faster. It shoots the arrow quite a bit faster. I bought it on clearance sale at the Walmart in Prestonsburg, Kentucky many, many years ago. And the first thing I had to do was get a can of matte black spray paint and paint the thing. And you think, why would you want to paint a brand new bow? Well, it had big silver letters going right down the front of it that said Robin Hood. And I wasn't going to be the laughingstock of my friends by going out in the woods hunting with a bow that said Robin Hood on it, so I painted it. Today, archery has become very technical. It's very complex. It's got all kinds of fancy, lightweight bows. It's got arrows made of all sorts of exotic things. They still have some wooden arrows, but they also make them out of fiberglass and aluminum and even carbon fiber. You can get all kinds of complex sighting systems to go on them. You can get counterbalances. If you ever watched archery in the Olympics, those bows they shoot have got counterbalances on that stick off the front of it that are 3 or 4 feet long that help them to shoot very, very accurately. You can even get specialized clothing to wear while you're shooting archery. You would think, well, what do you need specialized clothing for? But they make it and they sell it. It's all designed to make you a better shot. But it still boils down to a stick with a string on it shooting another stick at a target. Very simple. And there's four necessary ingredients to be successful at archery. First of all, you need an archer. That's the person with the brains who controls the shot. And then you need a bow, which provides direction and power to that shot. And third, you have arrows, which follow the direction of the archer. And finally, you need a quiver to carry the arrows. And you think, well, a quiver, that's not a very important piece of equipment. But it provides safety, a place for the arrows to rest until the moment that they're shot. Here's the thing you need to know about quivers. As long as the arrows are in the quiver, they're not fulfilling their purpose. As long as the arrows stay in the quiver, they don't do what they were designed to do. So with that in mind, look back at verses 3 through 5 of Psalm 127. And the word I want you to keep in mind now is gifts. That first word, gifts. Sons are a heritage from the Lord. Children are a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are sons born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their enemies in the gate. Children are a heritage, a gift, a reward from God. In biblical days, the archers would try to find the straightest pieces of wood to make their arrows out of. And then they'd put fletchings on them. That's the feathers on the back. So they would fly straight and true. And as I mentioned a moment ago, today's manufacturers are making arrows out of all sorts of different kinds of materials to get the same results. They make them out of aluminum. They make them out of fiberglass. They make them out of carbon fiber. They're balanced. You think it's just a stick, but they balance them. They test the strength of the arrow. They call that the spine, because when you shoot the arrow, it actually bends around the bow. And if you watch an arrow in slow motion, it kind of flies through the air like a fish swimming through water. But they make them out of just the right materials and match them up to the right bows so that they can fly straight in their intended direction. They come in different sizes and lengths and weights. They have different type of tips. You can have a target tip on it. You can have a field point on it. You can have a broadhead on it if you're hunting deer. You can have a fishing head on it if you're hunting fish. They even make some strange-looking tips that have springs on them, so you can hunt small game, and they're designed not to bury up in the brush or not to get stuck up in the tree, and they kill by blunt force impact when you're hunting squirrels or rabbits. And it may be that Solomon really knew what he was talking about when he compared our children with arrows, because they're all different. They're all very different. You know, that's something I noticed with our kids. I remember when Vicki was pregnant with Andrew, and the ladies across the street who were members of the church where I was preaching kept telling us 2 kids are not going to be the same as having 1. You can't go anywhere nearly as easy with 2 as you can with 1. And they were right. They were right. And when Jonathan came along, we figured, well, he'll pretty much be like Andrew. You know, they're both boys. We were surprised again. They're all 3 as different from each other as night and day. And sometimes you can tell they're different even before they're born. One may move in a certain way. One may be fairly still. One may be so high up that the mom can't think, she thinks, I can't breathe. And the other one may be so low that she feels like she's going to drop him, you know. And after they're born, one may be a night owl and like to stay up till the wee hours of the morning. One may like to go to sleep as soon as it gets dark out, you know. They're as different as night and day. 3 children, all born to the same parents, all raised in the same household, but they're all unique. They're all different in their own way. They have different interests, different abilities, and yet they're similar in several ways too. They all have their unique personalities, and they're all God's gift to us and bring joy to our lives in different ways. And that's not even getting into talking about the grandkids. That just multiplies it even more. But here's the sad thing. Many kids grow up today without a dad in their lives. Someone once said that fathers are like the abominable snowman. Their footprints everywhere, but they're hard to find. I think the statistics is that over 40% of children in America today grow up without a dad in their home. That's almost half, over 40%. And when you talk about some minorities, that jumps to over 60%. And then if you start talking about kids in an inner city situation, as many as 7 out of 10 children grow up without a dad in their life. I believe it's Satan's strategy to remove the men from their role of influence in society by taking the dads out of the family. I read an article, it's been a few years ago, it was talking about all the violence and the multiple shootings and that kind of stuff we're seeing happen today. And they attributed it to, and they had some statistics to go with it, that it's because of the lack of fathers in the home. That a lot of that is happening. And I believe they were right. I believe they were right. There are a lot of men today who want the fun, but they don't want the responsibility for their actions. They want it without strings. And Satan has learned that if he can remove the men from their homes and from their position in the family and from their place of influence in the lives of their children, he can bring great harm not only to their family, but also to society at large. Because young people never learn what the man's role is in the family and in society. They don't have that witness, that model for them. Pharaoh understood that if he could kill all the male boys when they were born, he could control an entire nation of people. And Herod believed if he could destroy all the baby boys 2 years old and under, he could secure his position of power. They understood the role that men have in families. Now, ultimately, our children, of course, are responsible for themselves before God. They're going to be responsible for determining the flight that they eventually take and the direction they go in life. But as parents, especially as dads, we need to do all we can to guide our children in God's ways. Our children are a gift from God, and they needed to be guided and set in that right direction. And that brings us to the second word that I want you to think about, and that's the word go. First is gift, and then go. Our purpose in raising our children is ultimately to let them go. And that's hard. A big part of our responsibility as parents is not to just guide them, but to set them on their own and let them go. There was a show on Discovery Channel not too long ago about some birds who built their nest in strange places. And this one particular bird built their nest on the side of a rocky cliff and kept them safe from predators. But once the birds hatched out and they were little fledglings, they were susceptible to other birds like eagles and hawks and stuff coming in and killing them. And so as soon as they were able to, the parents would kick the birds out of the nest. And there was videos of these birds tumbling down the rocks, and you think, well, that's going to kill them. But they all got up when they got to the bottom, and they followed their parents into some place that was safe. From the time that our kids are born, we need to understand that there'll be a time when they need to be kicked out of the nest. They need to be kicked out of the nest. Now, I realize there's some special situations where that's not best for either the parent or the child, or sometimes both. But in most positions, most situations, our responsibility is to let them go. And that can be one of the most difficult things in life that we have to face as parents, letting go. Turning them loose to make their own decisions, to choose their own directions, and also to make their own mistakes. I can remember that time with each of my 3 children. It was a difficult drive back to Georgia after we dropped Jennifer off at Milligan College. Vicki can tell you that if it wasn't for the fact that the truck was a stick shift, I'd have had her drive it, because there were tears in my eyes as we were coming down the interstate there for the first several miles. But it was even harder standing out here in front of the church when she and Ryan drove away on their honeymoon after their wedding. And I stood there for a long time watching those taillights disappear. And I remember the trip to Knoxville when we carried Andrew up there after he'd enlisted in the Air Force for him to head off to basic training. And I think it was harder for Vicki then than it was for me, because I had some understanding. I'd been through basic training before. I had some understanding of what was ahead and what he was going to face and what he was heading into. But it was still a time of letting go. Jonathan was a little bit different. Close your ears, Jonathan. Jonathan was a little different because he stayed in or near Dalton. But he'll testify the fact, too, that I struggled with letting him move out and get his own place. He moved in with Eddie Bradford for a while, got an apartment in his house, and then later he got a house in Lafayette. And I struggled with that for a while. I really did. Letting go is hard. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? Why can't we just pull back the bow and let the arrow fly? I think it's because it contradicts everything that we as parents have tried to do for so many years. We've been caring for them. We've been protecting them. We've been watching over them. We've prayed for them. We've shielded them. We've agonized over them. And we don't want to give up our parental control. It's hard to do that. Letting go represents a diminishing of our role, and that just doesn't feel very good, no matter what the situation. You may remember that John the Baptist reached a point in his ministry when he said of Jesus, "He must increase and I must decrease." And in essence, that's the role of a parent. We must decrease, they must increase. As our kids get older, their personal responsibility to the Lord must increase, and mom and dad must take a back seat. And when we're able to let go, it gives our kids a sense of accomplishment and completeness in their life. Now, this isn't something that happens all at once. It's a lifelong process. It's like learning to shoot a bow and arrow. When I had that recurve bow and was learning how to shoot archery the first time, I had a little range set up in my backyard, and it took hours and hours and hours back there shooting at that target, releasing that arrow over and over until I felt like I'd mastered it enough that maybe I could do some hunting with my bow. Our lifetimes are spent learning to release our children to the Lord. You know, we start releasing from the very moment they're born, when that umbilical cord is cut, you know. That bond that was there for 9 months between mom and baby. But it's separated. And then there's the first time you leave your child with a babysitter. And then the first day of school. By the way, all these require pictures. And Vicki's got them to prove it. Or teaching them to ride a bicycle after you've taken the training wheels off and running alongside the bike and holding them up and then kind of letting go and letting them go off on their own. And there's going to be some spills, there's going to be some accidents and some crash knees and scratches and blood, but eventually they get the hang of it. Or how about the first overnight stay at camp? Or their first real date? Here's a big one. When they get that little card with their picture on it that says they can legally drive a car, and you hand them the keys and they drive out the driveway. How nerve-wracking is that? All those are opportunity to learn to release our children. And as we release them each time, we are preparing them for their own life, eventually for their own marriage, and the time when they will be completely responsible for all of their decisions. And that includes being responsible for their own bills, their own insurance, and their own relationship and walk with God. Bill Cosby once said, he was speaking to the graduating class at the University of South Carolina, he said, "All across this great nation, people are graduating and hearing that they are going forth. My concern is whether they know where forth is." Forth is not back home, he said. "We love you and we're proud of you and we're not tired of you, but we could get tired of you," he said. "Forth could be next door to you, but you pay the rent." So we need to first of all recognize that they're gifts and that our purpose is to help them to go from us. And that last word that I told you to think about, God. As we take these gifts of God and pull back the bowstrings ready to send them forth, where are we aiming them? Where are they aiming? What's the target? You know, when you shoot a bow, you just don't randomly shoot it up into the air. You know that old saying, I shot an arrow in the air, it fell to earth, I know not where. That's not going to work. Where are you aiming your kids? As they grow, we're supposed to be teaching them things that are the most important things in life. And we do that best by not telling them, but by showing them in what we do, the choices we make, the things that we say, the things that we're committed to and dedicated to. And our goal ought to be to release them to a personal responsibility to God. One of the toughest things for a parent to do is to release their children to the point where they make their own mistakes and letting them make their own mistakes. Like the father of the prodigal son. Can you just imagine him watching his son walking away from home, going down the lane, headed out to the world, knowing that he's going to make some mistakes, but he's got to do that. He's got to let his son go to make his own mistakes. And as much as he wants to tell his son how to live or how to make those decisions, he gives him that complete freedom because the arrow is flying on its own now. There's going to be some mistakes, and there's going to be some consequences for those mistakes. And as parents, we know that, and it hurts us, but we've got to do it. It's good for our kids to have roots, but they also need wings. And at some point will come that final release. I was reading about a wedding, and I was preparing for this message, and the mother of the groom at one point, it was at the rehearsal dinner actually, and the mother of the groom stood up, got everybody's attention. She had a box. It was beautifully wrapped. And she opened it where everybody could see it and pulled out one of her favorite aprons. And then she reached in her pocketbook and got a pair of scissors and cut those apron strings off and handed them to her soon-to-be daughter-in-law with these words. She said, "Never again will I have the same place in my son's life. You are now the woman in his life." So back to my original question. What do I want for Father's Day? Vicki has a quote on our refrigerator. It's a quote from 3 John, verse 4, and it says, "I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth." That's what I want for Father's Day. To know that the arrows that Vicki and I shot out from our bow are flying true and hitting the mark that we aimed them for, a real relationship with their God and their Savior. Now, we want them to be happy. We want them to have a good relationship with their spouse. We want them to have good children and have a happy family life. We want them to have a good job, and a nice home and all that kind of things that everybody wants for their kids. But first and foremost, we want them to know God and to serve Him. And I trust that that's what you fathers and mothers want as well. But you can't give what you don't have. You can't give what you don't have. You can't share faith with your children unless you have that faith to share. Going back to Psalm 127 again, those first couple of verses tells us that unless the Lord builds the house, we labor in vain. And unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. Unless God is the center part of our family and our house, all that we do for our kids, all that we prepare them for, we can give them the greatest education in the world, it's not going to mean a thing if God isn't part of it. Parents, it's your responsibility. Do you know Christ as your Savior? If you don't, now is the time. For your sake, for the sake of your kids, and ultimately for the sake of your grandkids, will you make that decision as we stand?